The radio crackled with barely controlled fear. Overwatch, this is Sierra 4. We're surrounded, 50-plus hostiles. No way out. We need... The transmission cut off as gunfire erupted through the speaker. The sound of men fighting for their lives in a firefight they couldn't win. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes listened from the operations center, his jaw tight, knowing he was about to lose an 8-man SEAL team to an enemy that had them boxed in perfectly. 23 years in naval special warfare had taught him to recognize the sound of men dying. This was that sound. Then another voice came across the channel, so quiet he almost missed it. Female, calm. Overwatch, Shadow 1. I have eyes on Sierra 4. 53 hostiles confirmed. Engaging. Hayes felt his blood run cold. Shadow 1 wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that sector. Shadow 1 was a myth, a legend, a classified asset that most people in naval special warfare didn't believe existed. A ghost story told in quiet corners of forward operating bases. The sniper who appeared from nowhere, saved missions that couldn't be saved, then disappeared back into darkness. But the sniper rifle report that followed, distant, suppressed, but unmistakable, made him believe. The first enemy fighter dropped before anyone understood what was happening. 6 hours earlier, the compound had been silent. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross moved through the drainage culvert with the kind of patience that separated professionals from corpses. The concrete tunnel was barely 3 feet in diameter, filled with 6 inches of stagnant water that smelled like sewage in decay. Her rifle was strapped across her back. Her breathing was controlled through her nose to minimize sound. Every movement was calculated to produce 0 acoustic signature. 27 years old, 3 tours with Joint Special Operations Command, a kill count that remained classified because the numbers would raise questions that couldn't be answered in congressional hearings. She was small, 5'6", 130 pounds. People who didn't know better looked at her and saw a woman who should be teaching elementary school or working in an office with fluorescent lighting and motivational posters. They never saw the sniper who could hold position for 18 hours without moving, who could calculate wind speed, Coriolis effect, and barometric pressure in her head while her heart rate stayed below 60 beats per minute. Who could put a round through a target's eye socket at 400 meters in crosswind conditions that would make most shooters pack up and go home. The intelligence brief had been straightforward. Syrian compound, suspected weapons cache, possible high-value target coordination, reconnaissance only. Observe, document, report back. Standard JSOC taskings for assets operating in the region. But Ross had learned years ago that intelligence briefs were written by people who'd never put rounds downrange in anger. They worked from satellite imagery and signal intercepts and reports from sources who might be reliable or might be feeding information designed to get Americans killed. She trusted her own eyes, her own assessment, nothing else. The culvert ended at a grate that opened into the compound's eastern drainage system. Intelligence hadn't mapped this access point because satellite imagery couldn't see underground infrastructure. But Ross had studied construction patterns in Syrian facilities, had known there would be drainage, had known it would be unmapped, had known it would provide infiltration access that security wouldn't monitor. She removed the grate silently, set it aside, and emerged into pre-dawn darkness. The compound was larger than the briefing materials suggested. 3 main structures, multiple outbuildings, vehicles parked in organized rows. 2 organized, 2 maintained. This wasn't an abandoned facility being used for occasional coordination. This was an active operational base. Ross moved to the half-collapsed building on the compound's northern edge. 3 stories damaged in airstrikes months earlier, written off as tactically irrelevant, which made it perfect. Nobody watched positions they considered destroyed. She climbed interior stairs that groaned under minimal weight, testing each step before committing. The 3rd floor was mostly intact despite external damage. A corner position offered clear sight lines across the entire compound. elevation advantage, multiple firing lanes, covered withdrawal routes. She set up her hide with mechanical precision developed through hundreds of hours of training. M110 semi-automatic sniper system, heavily modified, chambered in 7.62 millimeter. Suppressor that reduced but didn't eliminate acoustic signature. Schmidt and Bender scope with illuminated reticle and ranging capability out to 1,000 meters. 20 rounds in the magazine. 180 in reserve pouches. Enough ammunition to fight a small war or save 8 men from certain death. She settled into position at 0247 hours. Heart rate, 55 beats per minute. Respiration, 8 breaths per minute. Body temperature regulated through layered clothing that allowed precise thermal management. Hydration bladder with 2 liters. Protein bars that wouldn't require wrapper noise. Waste management system that allowed remaining in position for extended duration. Everything a professional sniper needed to become part of the architecture. Through her scope, the compound revealed its secrets. Intelligence had reported light security, 5 to 8 guards on rotating patrol, minimal defensive preparation. Intelligence was catastrophically wrong. Ross counted 17 fighters in the first hour. By 0400, she'd identified 32. By 0500, the count reached 47. All armed, all moving with tactical discipline that suggested military training rather than militia enthusiasm. Coordinated patrol patterns, communication checks, weapons maintenance. This wasn't light security. This was a hardened defensive position. She watched a commander directing preparations, mid-40s, moving with authority that made others defer. He positioned machine gun nests with overlapping fields of fire, placed RPG teams at strategic choke points, established radio communication protocols. This man knew how to fight, knew how to kill, and he was preparing for something. At 0530, vehicle movement at the main gate. 3 technical trucks with mounted weapons. Another 14 fighters. The count climbed to 53. Ross keyed her radio 3 times. Standard abort signal, warning that mission parameters had changed, that the intelligence was compromised, that insertion would be walking into a prepared kill zone. No response. She tried again. 3 distinct key clicks. The pattern that meant danger, that meant withdraw, that meant the mission was blown before it started. Static, communication interference, atmospheric conditions, or enemy jamming, or simple bad luck with radio propagation. The SEALs wouldn't receive the warning, wouldn't know that the light security they expected was actually a reinforced company strength element waiting in prepared positions. They'd insert anyway, complete their mission, walk into a massacre. Professional protocol said maintain observation, document the compound, report findings through proper channels, let command make decisions about adjusting mission parameters. But men would die while command reviewed options. Ross had joined Joint Special Operations Command because regular military structure moved too slowly when seconds mattered. JSOC existed in the gray space between official authorization and operational necessity. They did things that couldn't be briefed to Congress, operated in countries where American military presence was officially non-existent, took actions that would never appear in after-action reports. She understood gray space, lived in it, made decisions that written orders couldn't accommodate. At 0647, she saw the SEAL team breach the compound's western wall. 8 men moving with textbook tactical precision, staggered formation, overlapping sectors of fire, communication discipline. Professional warriors executing a mission they'd rehearsed dozens of times. Walking into a trap that would kill them all. The enemy waited until the SEALs were 30 meters inside the compound. Let them commit. Let them move past the easy withdrawal point, then open fire from 3 directions simultaneously. The SEALs reacted instantly, returned fire, moved to cover, executed immediate action drills that kept them alive through the first 30 seconds. They fought their way to a 2-story structure that offered defensive position, poured through the entrance, established hasty fighting positions at windows and doorways. But they were surrounded, outnumbered 6-1, taking fire from machine guns and rifles and rocket-propelled grenades that would eventually overwhelm any defense. Ross watched through her scope as the math played out. 8 shooters, finite ammunition, no reinforcement, no extraction possible until they fought their way to a landing zone that was now behind enemy lines. They could hold for maybe 20 minutes, 30 if they were exceptional. Then ammunition would run out, casualties would mount, and the enemy would overrun their position. She'd seen this before. Different country, different fighters, same mathematics of death. Through her radio, frantic coordination between the SEAL team leader and operational command. Overwatch, Sierra 4 actual, we are heavily engaged. 50 plus hostiles, request immediate fire support. Sierra 4, Overwatch, negative on fire support, no assets in range. Extract to primary LZ, QRF inbound, ETA 45 minutes. 45 minutes. The SEALs would be dead in 20. Ross made the decision that would either save 8 lives or end her career. She picked up her radio. Overwatch, Shadow 1, I have eyes on Sierra 4. 53 hostiles confirmed, engaging. There was silence on the channel. Then Hayes' voice, tight with confusion and desperate hope. Shadow 1, authenticate. Ross transmitted her authentication code, the sequence that identified her as a JSOC asset with authorization to operate in theater. The code that meant she wasn't some random shooter trying to help. She was a professional, a specialist, someone who could actually change the tactical situation. Authentication confirmed. Shadow 1, what's your position? Elevated Overwatch, North Compound, 300 meters from Sierra 4 position. Clear sight lines on hostile formations. Another pause. Hayes was processing. Shadow 1 was real. Shadow 1 was in position. Shadow 1 was about to do something that would violate every written protocol about reconnaissance assets engaging without explicit authorization. But 8 men were dying, and protocols didn't stop bullets. Shadow 1, you are clear to engage. Take the shot. Ross had already acquired her first target, the enemy commander. 43 meters from the SEAL position, directing fire from behind a low concrete wall. Perfect cover from the SEAL's angles. Completely exposed to Ross's elevated position 300 meters north. She centered the crosshairs on his torso, compensated for the range, for the slight wind from the east, for the elevation differential. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped to 52 beats per minute. The scope's reticle settled with mechanical steadiness. She pressed the trigger with pressure so gradual it surprised her when the rifle fired. The suppressor reduced the report to something that wouldn't immediately give away her position. Just a cough in the pre-dawn darkness. Background noise in a firefight already echoing across the compound. 300 meters away, the enemy commander collapsed like someone had cut his strings. Dead before he understood he'd been shot. Dead before his brain could process the bullet that severed his spine and stopped his heart. Ross worked the bolt, the mechanical action that chambered the next round. Brass casing ejected, rolling across the concrete floor. New round seated, rifle ready, target 2. A fighter moving between positions, trying to coordinate a flanking maneuver against the SEAL position. He was shouting orders, pointing, directing 3 other fighters to advance through cover that would put them in position to enfilade the SEAL's defensive line. Ross led him by half a body length, squeezed the trigger, watched him drop. 2 down, 51 remaining. The enemy didn't know they were being engaged from a position they thought was unoccupied. They were focused on the SEALs, pouring fire into the defensive position, shouting orders, preparing for the assault that would overrun 8 Americans and add their bodies to the count of casualties that never made the evening news. Ross used that focus against them. She worked methodically through their leadership structure. Every fighter who was giving orders, every position that was coordinating the attack, every threat that posed the greatest danger to the SEALs who were fighting for their lives 300 meters away. She prioritized machine gun positions. Those could suppress the entire SEAL team, keep them pinned while RPG teams moved into firing positions. 3 machine guns, 3 shooters, 3 rounds. The guns went silent. The crews died without understanding why their weapons suddenly stopped firing. Then RPG carriers, men with rocket-propelled grenades that could destroy the building the SEALs were defending, turned their fortress into a tomb. 5 carriers identified through the scope, 5 shots, 5 bodies. Then radio operators, the fighters calling for reinforcements, coordinating the assault, maintaining communication with whatever command structure was directing this operation. 4 operators, 4 rounds. The enemy's coordination started breaking down. Orders weren't being transmitted. Reinforcements weren't being called. In 3 minutes, Ross eliminated 9 high-value targets. The enemy still didn't understand what was happening. They saw their leaders falling, their key positions going silent, but in the chaos of a firefight where hundreds of rounds were being fired every minute, it took time to recognize a pattern, to understand that someone was killing them with surgical precision from a position they couldn't see. Ross gave them no time. She transitioned from methodical elimination to rapid engagement. The suppressor kept her position ambiguous. The elevated angle made her fire seem like it was coming from multiple directions. The enemy started to panic, pulling back from their advanced positions, seeking better cover, their assault momentum breaking like a wave against rocks. The SEALs recognized the change immediately. Through the radio, confusion but professional adaptation, taking advantage of the enemy's disorganization to improve their own positions, redistribute ammunition, treat their wounded. These were professionals. They didn't waste time asking questions when the tactical situation improved. They exploited it. Ross keyed her radio. Sierra 4, this is Shadow 1. Your 9 o'clock position has 3 machine gun nests. I'm eliminating them now. When they're down, you have a 30-second window to reposition to the northeast corner. Acknowledge. There was a pause. Then a male voice, rough with adrenaline but controlled. Shadow 1, Sierra 4 actual. Copy all. Who the hell are you? Someone who doesn't want to watch you die. Stand by for suppression. Ross shifted her aim to the machine gun positions she'd identified. 3 fighters, well-positioned behind sandbags, putting sustained fire on the SEAL position. They thought they were safe behind their fortifications, thought sandbags would stop anything the SEALs could throw at them. They were wrong. Ross put 3 rounds through the sandbags, 7.62 millimeter penetrators that defeated the improvised protection like it was tissue paper. 3 fighters down in 5 seconds. The machine guns went silent. Sierra 4, you're clear. Move now. She watched through her scope as the SEALs executed a tactical displacement, moving to a better position with overlapping fields of fire, better cover, improved sightlines, professional movement under fire. The kind of thing that took years of training to make automatic. 2 enemy fighters popped up to engage the moving SEALs. Ross dropped both before they could fire. 15 enemies eliminated, 38 remaining. But the enemy was adapting. They'd figured out that someone was shooting at them from an elevated position. They were spreading out, making themselves harder targets, using cover more effectively. Some were starting to scan the surrounding buildings, trying to identify Ross's location. She needed to move. Ross broke down her position in 30 seconds, secured her rifle, collected her brass casings, leave no evidence, moved to a secondary position she'd prepared 3 hours earlier during her initial reconnaissance. 20 meters away, different angle, different line of sight. By the time enemy fighters started putting rounds into her original position, she was already reestablished and engaging from the new location. The enemy's confusion multiplied. They thought they'd identified her position, but fire was still coming, and now it seemed like it was from a different angle entirely. Some fighters started shooting at shadows, wasting ammunition on empty buildings. Others huddled behind cover, afraid to move, afraid to expose themselves to the unseen threat that was killing them with mechanical precision. Ross exploited their fear. She picked off anyone who showed courage, anyone who tried to rally their forces, anyone who attempted to organize a counterattack. Leadership was systematically eliminated. Initiative was punished with immediate death. The enemy force that had been a coordinated assault element began fragmenting into individuals focused on personal survival. Through her scope, Ross watched the tactical situation transform. 8 SEALs who'd been minutes from death were now holding a defensible position against an enemy force that was falling apart. The mathematics of combat had reversed. The hunters were becoming the hunted. But the battle was far from over. The technical came roaring through the compound's east gate like mechanized death. Pickup truck, modified for war, reinforced suspension, armored cab, and mounted in the bed, the weapon that changed everything. A Browning M250 caliber machine gun. The kind of weapon that could punch through concrete walls, turn vehicle frames into shrapnel, and turn the SEAL's defensive position into a killing floor. Ross saw it the moment it cleared the gate, calculated the threat in the 2 seconds it took the vehicle to accelerate toward firing position. 50 caliber effective range, 1,800 meters. Rate of fire, 500 rounds per minute. Armor penetration capability, sufficient to defeat any cover the SEALs currently occupied. If that gun opened up, 8 men would die in 30 seconds. She shifted her aim, acquired the driver through the windshield, moved the crosshairs from center mass to head. The truck was moving at 40 kilometers per hour, weaving slightly, engine roaring. Moving target, elevated shooter, 320 meters downrange. Ross led the target, compensated for vehicle speed and direction, exhaled slowly, pressed the trigger. The 7.62 millimeter round crossed 320 meters in under half a second, penetrated the windshield at an angle that defeated the glass's structural integrity, entered the driver's skull just above the left eye, exited through the base of his skull, carrying brain matter and bone fragments across the cab interior. The driver's head snapped back. His hands went slack on the wheel. His dead weight pulled the steering column hard right. The technical swerved violently. Tires screamed. The gunner in the bed grabbed for support as the vehicle careened out of control at 40 kilometers per hour. Momentum and physics combining into inevitable disaster. The truck hit a concrete wall with the sound of metal tearing and engines dying. The impact threw the gunner from the bed like a rag doll. He landed hard on packed earth 8 meters from the wreck, stunned but alive, trying to get up, trying to orient himself. Ross's second shot put him down permanently. The technical sat smoking against the wall. 50 caliber gun pointed uselessly at the sky. 2 bodies. 1 threat eliminated before it could fire a single round. But the crash had drawn attention. Enemy fighters were converging on the wreck, and some of them were finally looking in the right direction, toward Ross's building, toward the elevated position that had been killing them for the past 6 minutes. Through her scope, she saw muzzle flashes from multiple positions, all aimed at her general area. Rounds began impacting the walls around her, punching through degraded concrete, sending dust and fragments into the air. She was taking fire from at least 8 different shooters. None of them had her exact position yet, but it was only a matter of time. She made herself a smaller target, repositioned behind a support column that offered better protection, and continued engaging. An enemy fighter was setting up an RPG 200 meters south, kneeling behind cover, aiming the rocket-propelled grenade at her building. If he fired, the warhead would blow through whatever wall she was hiding behind and turn her position into a pressure cooker of explosive force and shrapnel. Ross put a round through his chest before he could finalize his aim. He collapsed across the RPG launcher, the weapon falling unfired from dead hands. Another fighter was directing the incoming fire, pointing toward her position, shouting orders, coordinating 8 shooters who were pumping rounds into her building. He was making them effective, making them dangerous. Ross eliminated him with a headshot that made the others hesitate. When leadership dies, warriors reconsider their courage. Through the radio, the SEAL team leader's voice. Shadow 1, you're taking fire. What's your status? Sierra 4, I'm fine. Stay in position. I'm about to make things interesting. 3 hours earlier, during her initial reconnaissance, Ross had done more than just observe the compound. She'd moved through the facility during the darkest hours before dawn, placed demolition charges in strategic locations, not enough to level buildings, but enough to create chaos and confusion at a moment of her choosing. Small packages of C4 explosive, radio-controlled detonators, positioned where they would do maximum psychological damage with minimal risk to the SEALs. She keyed the remote detonator. 3 explosions erupted simultaneously across the compound. The first hit a fuel depot on the western wall. Diesel storage that went up in a fireball that turned night into day. Flames that climbed 15 meters into the pre-dawn sky. Black smoke rolling like thunderclouds. Heat that could be felt 300 meters away. The second detonated in the vehicle storage area near the main gate. Not enough explosive to destroy the vehicles, but enough to rupture fuel tanks and ignite gasoline that spread across packed earth like liquid fire. 3 trucks caught immediately. Ammunition inside cooked off. Small arms rounds detonating in random directions. Tracer rounds streaking across the compound like angry fireflies. The third charge hit an ammunition cache in the southern building. Ross had identified it during reconnaissance by the way guards positioned themselves, by the caution they showed moving containers, by the fear in their body language. The explosion was massive. Secondary detonations followed as stored munitions caught fire. RPG warheads exploding in chain reactions, mortar rounds cooking off, rifle ammunition popping like firecrackers at a celebration. The building's roof lifted 3 meters, hung suspended for a moment that seemed to violate physics, then collapsed inward in a shower of concrete and rebar. The combined effect was spectacular and terrifying. Enemy fighters panicked. Some thought they were under aerial bombardment. Others thought the SEALs had brought reinforcements. All of them stopped shooting at Ross's position and sought cover from what they believed was a massive assault. 10 seconds of chaos. Ross used every one of them. 6 targets, all exposed, all confused, all vulnerable. Her rifle spoke with mechanical precision. The suppressed reports lost in the larger explosions, echoing across the compound. Target acquired. Round fired. Target down. Chamber the next round. Acquire. Fire. Down. 6 shots. 6 bodies. 6 enemy fighters who died without understanding that the explosions were diversion, that the real threat was still the invisible shooter who'd been killing them since the battle began. Her kill count climbed to 21. The SEALs understood immediately. These were professionals who recognized opportunity when they saw it. They emerged from their defensive position with coordinated fire and movement, engaging enemy fighters who were still reeling from explosions, still disoriented, still trying to understand what was happening. Ross provided overwatch, eliminating threats the SEALs couldn't see, calling out positions, directing their advance with the kind of tactical coordination that only came from someone who could see the entire battlefield. Sierra 4, you have 2 hostiles in the second-floor window at your 1 o'clock. I'm engaging now. Her rifle barked twice. 2 fighters tumbled from the window, bodies that hit the ground with sounds that ended whatever fight they'd brought to this battle. Sierra 4, 3 more trying to flank you from the alley on your right. Hold position. Ross shifted her aim, tracked 3 fighters moving through a narrow alley with the confidence of men who thought they'd found an undefended approach. She waited for them to pass through gaps in cover, timed her shots for maximum efficiency. 3 quick shots. 3 bodies dropped in the alley. The flanking attempt defeated before it fully developed. The enemy force was disintegrating. Some fighters were fleeing toward compound exits. Others were surrendering, throwing down weapons, raising hands. The rest were dying as they tried to maintain a defense that had completely collapsed. But Ross's situational awareness flagged a new threat. 4 enemy fighters on a rooftop 200 meters east. They were setting up a mortar, the tube, the base plate, the bipod. One man sighting through an aiming circle, another preparing rounds, a third consulting a range card, a fourth directing the operation with hand signals and commands. If they got that weapon operational, they could drop indirect fire on the SEAL position with devastating effect. High explosive rounds falling from above, detonating inside the defensive perimeter, killing men who couldn't see the threat coming. Ross calculated the engagement. 200 meters, elevated targets, 4 shooters working in coordination, wind gusting from the northeast at approximately 8 kilometers per hour. She'd need to eliminate all 4 quickly before they could scatter or return fire. She took a breath, let it out slowly, entered what snipers called the zone. That mental state where time seemed to slow down, where every variable became clear, where muscle memory and training merged into something approaching supernatural precision, where the rifle became an extension of thought, and thought became death delivered at supersonic velocity. First shot. The spotter looking through binoculars, calling adjustments to the gunner. The man whose eyes were occupied with optics, who wouldn't see the threat until the round was already in flight. Ross squeezed the trigger. 200 meters downrange, the spotter dropped without seeing the bullet that killed him. His binoculars clattered across the rooftop. His body slumped across the mortar base plate. Second shot. The gunner adjusting the mortar's elevation. Hands on the tube, making fine corrections, preparing to drop the first round that would begin the bombardment. He collapsed across the weapon he'd been setting up, blood spreading across metal that would never fire. Third shot. The loader reaching for another round, fingers closing on the mortar shell, ready to hand it to a gunner who was already dead. He never completed the motion. The round fell from nerveless fingers. His body followed it down. Fourth shot. The commander, finally realizing they were under attack, trying to run, making it 3 steps before understanding caught up with him. Ross's bullet caught him between the shoulder blades, punched through his spine, dropped him on the rooftop that would become his grave. 4 shooters, 4 shots, 7 seconds. The mortar position eliminated before it could fire a single round. Sierra 4, mortar threat neutralized. You're clear to advance to the north compound. The SEAL team leader's voice came back, rough with adrenaline and disbelief. Shadow 1, how many damn guns do you have up there? That's at least 30 kills. 1 gun, Sierra 4, just making it count. The SEALs pushed harder, shifting from defensive to aggressive, launching their own counterattacks against disorganized enemy positions, reclaiming ground, establishing fire superiority, turning a massacre into a victory. Ross coordinated with them over the radio, calling out targets, identifying threats they couldn't see from ground level, directing their movements with tactical awareness that only came from elevated observation and years of experience doing exactly this kind of work. Sierra 4, you have 4 hostiles trying to flank your west position, 2 behind the blue truck, 2 in the doorway at your 10 o'clock. I'm engaging the truck position now. Her rifle spoke twice. 2 bodies dropped behind the truck. The SEALs engaged the doorway position with grenades and automatic fire. Eliminated that threat before it could develop into something worse. 28 enemies down, 25 remaining. But ammunition was becoming a concern. Ross had fired 85 rounds, had 115 remaining. Against 25 enemy fighters, that was still favorable mathematics. But the SEALs needed her fire support to maintain their momentum. Every round had to count. Every shot had to eliminate a threat or create an opportunity. She shifted tactics, focused on targets that posed imminent danger to the SEALs rather than targets of opportunity. An RPG gunner lining up a shot on the SEAL position, Ross eliminated him before he could fire. The rocket-propelled grenade fell from dead hands, detonated against the ground in a blast that wounded 2 nearby fighters and made the others seek cover. A group of 7 fighters preparing to storm the building the SEALs had originally defended, gathering courage, working themselves up for an assault that would take them through a fatal funnel of fire. Ross picked off the 3 leaders, the men who were shouting encouragement, who were pointing directions, who were trying to organize courage from men who were rightfully terrified. 3 quick shots, 3 bodies. The assault broke before it began. The remaining 4 fighters scattered, ran for different exits, chose survival over valor. A sniper on a distant rooftop, 400 meters east, targeting the SEALs with patience and skill. Professional shooter, good concealment, patient, dangerous. Ross spotted him from his muzzle signature when he fired at one of the SEALs, saw the flash, calculated his position from the angle of his shot, marked his location in her mind. She waited. The enemy sniper would be proud of that shot, would settle back into his scope, would look for his next target, would present a silhouette for just a moment as he repositioned for better angle. Ross watched through her own scope, waited for that moment, that fraction of a second when concealment broke and target became visible. It came. The enemy sniper's head appeared in her reticle, side profile, cheekbone pressed against his rifle stock, eye behind his optic, concentration absolute. Ross fired. The round crossed 400 meters in under a second, found the enemy sniper's head, ended someone who might have killed multiple SEALs if Ross hadn't been there, if she hadn't been watching, if she hadn't been better. The enemy sniper had been good, concealed position, good angle, patient technique, but Ross was better. The SEALs were pushing now, clearing buildings, consolidating positions, turning a defensive disaster into an offensive success. But the enemy still had numbers, still had fighters willing to die, and the battle was far from over. Through her scope, Ross saw movement at the compound's north exit, the high-value target, the man this mission had been about, the coordinator who'd been using this facility to plan attacks across 3 countries, trying to escape through a back exit with 4 bodyguards. Professional security detail moving with tactical discipline, abandoning his fighters, leaving them to die while he fled to safety. Ross made a decision in the half-second she had to make it. She could keep supporting the SEALs, or she could complete their original mission objective. She chose both. Sierra 4, primary target is exiting through the north compound exit with 4 security. I'm engaging. You have 12 hostiles remaining in the main compound. Can you handle them? The SEAL team leader's response was immediate. Shadow 1, Sierra 4, we've got it. Take the shot. Ross shifted her aim to the fleeing group. Range, 450 meters. Targets moving at speed, weaving between obstacles. Professional security detail that knew how to protect a principal. Making themselves hard targets. Using cover effectively. Moving with the kind of tactical awareness that came from expensive training. This wouldn't be easy. She started with the bodyguards. They were threats, and they were blocking her shot at the primary target. The high-value objective who'd planned operations that killed Americans and allies, who'd coordinated attacks across 3 countries, who'd earned his place on the kill list through actions that justified what was about to happen. The first bodyguard went down cleanly. Center mass shot at 450 meters while moving. He dropped instantly, dead before his body registered the impact. The others reacted professionally, formed a protective shield around their principal, moved faster, made themselves harder targets, used cover more effectively. These were trained operators, expensive contractors, men who knew their business. Ross adjusted, led her targets, timed her shots for when movement patterns exposed vulnerabilities that existed for fractions of seconds. Second bodyguard down. Caught him during a turn when his body armor didn't cover his side. The round punched through ribs and lungs and heart. He collapsed without sound. Third bodyguard down. Headshot when he looked back to check their six. Professional awareness that became professional liability. The round entered behind his ear, exited through his face, ended his contract permanently. The fourth bodyguard was exceptional, using cover effectively, staying close to the principal, making a clean shot nearly impossible, moving with the kind of tactical awareness that suggested Tier 1 training. Ross shot him through the vehicle he was hiding behind. The 7.62 millimeter round punched through the car door, through sheet metal and interior upholstery in the bodyguard's torso, through his spine and major organs and everything that kept a human being functioning, into the engine block behind him, where it finally stopped after delivering all its kinetic energy into flesh and bone. He collapsed, blood spreading across dusty ground, leaving the high-value target completely exposed and alone. The man realized his situation and ran, sprinted for the compound wall with the kind of terror that came from knowing death was stalking him. He was fast, probably had been a fighter himself before becoming a coordinator, moved with evasive patterns that suggested training, weaving, using obstacles, making himself an extremely difficult target for anyone who wasn't Ross. She tracked him through her scope, compensating for his speed and erratic movement, waiting for the moment when his pattern became predictable, when survival instinct overrode tactical training. It came when he approached the wall. He had to commit to his path, had to stop weaving, had to focus on the climb, had to present a target. Ross led him by 2 body lengths, exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger with pressure so gradual it surprised her when the rifle fired. The round flew true, caught the high-value target in the upper spine, severed his spinal cord, dropped him 15 feet from the wall he'd been trying to climb, from the escape he'd been trying to make, from the safety that would never arrive. The mission objective completed by someone who wasn't even supposed to be on the mission. Sierra 4, primary target is down. Confirm kill from your position when able. The SEAL team leader's voice came back, rough with exhaustion and something that might have been awe. Shadow 1, moving to confirm now. And seriously, that's the best shooting I've ever witnessed. Ross smiled slightly, kept scanning for threats. The battle wasn't over until every hostile was neutralized or had fled. She continued to provide overwatch while the SEALs cleared the remaining fighters, eliminated 3 more enemy combatants who tried to ambush the team during their clearing operations, each one dropping before they could fire at the SEALs who'd never seen them. One fighter had been particularly dangerous, concealed in a destroyed vehicle with a clear angle on the SEAL point man, finger on the trigger of an RPG that would have killed at least 2 Americans if Ross hadn't been watching. If she hadn't seen him a half second before he fired. She saw him, put a round through the tiny gap between his cover and his position, watched him slump forward, the RPG falling unfired from dead hands. Another American who'd go home because someone he didn't know had been watching when it mattered. 35 enemies killed. 18 fled into the Syrian countryside, where they'd spend the rest of their lives knowing that an American sniper had destroyed their entire force, that they'd survived not through skill, but through luck and cowardice. 8 Navy SEALs survived what should have been a massacre. The compound fell silent, the kind of silence that followed battles. That came after adrenaline faded and exhaustion set in. When warriors checked themselves for wounds they hadn't felt during the fighting. When they counted their remaining ammunition and realized how close they'd come to running dry. Ross broke down her position, packed her equipment, secured her rifle, collected her brass casings, every single one, because operators left no evidence of their presence. She'd been in position for nearly 7 hours, had engaged in one of the most intense sniper operations in recent memory, had fired 112 rounds, had achieved 35 confirmed kills, had saved 8 American lives and completed a high-value target elimination that would disrupt enemy operations for months. And now she'd disappear back into the shadows that had concealed her before the shooting started. Her radio crackled. Shadow 1, Sierra 4 actual. We'd like to meet our guardian angel. What's your position? Ross hesitated. She'd been trained to avoid direct contact with the units she supported, to remain in the shadows, to complete her mission without recognition or acknowledgement. JSOC assets didn't do meet and greets, didn't pose for photographs, didn't collect gratitude from the people they saved. But something about the way the SEAL team leader had said it made her reconsider. The genuine gratitude in his voice, the human need to thank someone who'd saved your life, the warrior's desire to look in the eyes of the person who'd stood in the gap when death was certain. Sierra 4, I'm moving to the compound north wall. 5 minutes. She descended from her hide position, moving through the compound with tactical awareness that kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. Even with the enemy defeated, training dictated caution. She cleared corners, checked for stragglers, kept her rifle ready even though the probability of contact was minimal. Professional habits kept professionals alive. The SEALs were waiting at the north wall when she arrived. 8 men, dirt-covered, blood-stained, exhausted, but alive. They looked at her with expressions that ranged from gratitude to disbelief. Ross was 5'6", maybe 130 pounds, young enough to be underestimated by people who didn't know better. She was carrying a rifle that weighed nearly 20 pounds with ammunition and optics, wearing tactical gear that added another 30 pounds, moving like the weight didn't exist. And she didn't look like she just fought a battle that had left 35 enemy fighters dead across a compound that would be remembered in classified briefings for years to come. The team leader stepped forward, mid-30s, weathered by deployments and decisions, eyes that had seen too much combat to be surprised by much anymore, but surprised now. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes, SEAL Team 7. That was the most impressive shooting I've ever witnessed in 23 years of naval special warfare. Ross slung her rifle and extended her hand. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, JSOC attached. Glad I could help. Hayes shook her hand firmly. His grip was strong, respectful, the handshake of one professional warrior to another. Help? You saved our lives. We were about to be overrun. I had 8 men about to die and no way to save them. Then you, he gestured at the compound, at the bodies scattered throughout, at the evidence of precision shooting that had turned impossible odds into a tactical victory that would be studied in special operations courses for years. Where the hell did you come from? I've been here for 6 hours. Reconnaissance mission. When I saw you insert, I tried to warn you off. The compound was more heavily defended than intelligence indicated. Hayes frowned. We got no warning. Radio interference, probably. By the time I realized you weren't receiving, you'd already committed. Ross shrugged, the gesture of someone who'd done what needed doing without requiring recognition for it. At that point, mission parameters changed. I could watch you die, or I could engage. Chose to engage. One of the other SEALs spoke up. Younger operator, Texas accent, eyes that kept tracking back to Ross like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Ma'am, I counted at least 35 hostile kills in 12 minutes from concealment while coordinating our movements and completing the primary mission objective. That's not just help. That's goddamn miraculous. Ross didn't respond to that, didn't know how to respond to praise that seemed excessive, even if it was technically accurate. She'd done what needed doing, used skills refined through years of training, achieved results that training made possible. Nothing miraculous about it. Just professionalism applied to problems that required violent solutions. Your team performed well under pressure, she said instead, maintained discipline, took advantage of opportunities I created, good tactical awareness despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Hayes smiled slightly, the expression of a man who recognized deflection when he heard it. Is that your way of saying we're not completely incompetent? That's my way of saying you're SEALs. I'd expect nothing less. Ross checked her watch. The gesture automatic. Professional habit that kept operations on schedule, even when adrenaline wanted to stretch time into something elastic and unreliable. Extraction window opens in 20 minutes. We should consolidate and move to the LZ. They moved through the compound toward the designated landing zone, 2 kilometers north, open ground that would make them vulnerable during movement, but provided clear space for helicopter extraction. As they walked, the young SEAL from Texas, Petty Officer Jake Morrison, fell into step beside Ross. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why'd you engage? Your orders were reconnaissance only. You could have observed and reported. Let command make the call on supporting us. But you violated your mission parameters. Risk your career. Why?" Ross was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer a question that went to the core of why she did this work. Because orders are written by people who aren't on the ground, who don't see what's happening in real time, who can't make decisions based on immediate tactical reality. My orders said reconnaissance only, but my eyes said 8 Americans were about to die, and I had the capability to change that outcome. She met Morrison's eyes. "You're alive because I chose to engage. Would you rather I followed orders?" Morrison shook his head. "No, ma'am. I'd rather be alive." "Then that's why. Sometimes the right decision violates the written order. You learn to live with that if you want to operate in the gray spaces where this work happens." They reached the landing zone 12 minutes later. Hayes positioned his team in a defensive perimeter. Ross took an elevated position on a small rise that offered overwatch of the entire area. The extraction helicopter appeared as a distant sound that grew into rotor wash and turbine scream. A modified Black Hawk, flown by pilots who specialize in getting special operations teams out of places they weren't supposed to be. It flared over the landing zone, settled onto the ground with wheels that barely touched before the SEALs were moving. Ross was last aboard, sweeping the perimeter one final time before breaking from her position and sprinting to the helicopter, maintaining security until the moment she was through the door and the bird was lifting. Inside the cabin, Hayes sat down next to her, had to lean close and speak loud to be heard over rotor noise and wind. "Where are they taking you?" "Different facility. JSOC has separate debriefing procedures." Hayes nodded, understanding that their paths would diverge as soon as they landed. "I'm putting you in for a commendation." Ross looked at him. "Please don't. You saved 8 American lives. That deserves recognition." "I was never here. This mission never happened." "You know how JSOC works." Hayes studied her for a moment. "Then let me say off the record that you're the kind of operator we all hope is out there watching our backs. The kind that makes impossible missions survivable." Ross didn't know how to respond to that, so she just nodded, accepted the sentiment, let it be enough. When the helicopter landed at the forward operating base, Hayes extended his hand one final time. "Thank you, for all of us. We owe you everything." Ross shook his hand. "You owe me nothing. You were doing your job. I was doing mine. We both served our country today. That's enough." The SEALs offloaded, moving toward debriefing facilities where they'd spend hours explaining what happened. Ross moved toward a different building, where JSOC handlers waited with different questions. But before she disappeared, Hayes caught her one last time. "Ross, Amaya, I've been a SEAL for 23 years, worked with the best operators in the world. What you did today wasn't just exceptional. It was the best shooting I've ever witnessed. I wanted you to know that." Ross held his gaze, saw the sincerity there. "Thank you. That means something." Then she walked into the JSOC building and disappeared from his view. The after-action reports were carefully worded. 8-man SEAL team engaged superior enemy force. Enemy defeated through superior tactics and marksmanship. High-value target eliminated. 0 friendly casualties. Technical details classified. Contributing personnel classified. But within naval special warfare, the story spread. About the SEAL team that had been surrounded. About the voice that came over the radio. Female, calm, promising salvation. About the shooting that followed, Precision fire that eliminated 35 enemies in 12 minutes. About the operator they called Shadow 1. Some said it was exaggerated. Some said it couldn't be real. Some said it was a team effort attributed to one person. But the 8 SEALs who'd been there knew the truth. They'd seen the evidence. 35 bodies dropped with precision that only came from world-class marksmanship. They'd coordinated with her over the radio. They'd met her afterward. The small woman with the big rifle who'd accomplished what seemed impossible. And they knew that somewhere in the JSOC machinery, there were operators like Amaya Ross, who operated in shadows, who took missions that didn't officially exist, who saved lives without seeking recognition. Hayes put her in for a commendation anyway, knowing it would be classified. The citation was brief. On a specific date, in a specific location, a JSOC asset engaged superior enemy forces, eliminated 35 hostile combatants, completed a high-value target mission, saved 8 American lives through exceptional skill and courage under fire. Amaya Ross never saw that citation, never knew it existed. She was already deployed on her next mission. But on the wall of Hayes' office, there was a photograph. 8 SEALs standing at a compound wall, and one small woman holding a rifle. No names, no location, no date. Just a reminder that sometimes when SEALs whispered they were surrounded, salvation came from someone they never knew was there. 3 months later, Ross found herself supporting a Ranger platoon pinned down in Helmand Province. Taliban fighters had prepared a kill zone with no escape routes. She climbed a cliff face that required skills most snipers didn't have. 400 meters of vertical rock. Reached a ledge barely wide enough for a shooting platform. And when she opened fire, 23 enemy fighters learned what 35 fighters in Syria had learned. That somewhere in modern warfare, there was a sniper who didn't accept impossible odds as an excuse to let Americans die. The Rangers never learned her name, just heard that calm voice over the radio. Overwatch, Shadow 1, I have eyes on your position, engaging, and watch their enemies fall until extraction arrived. The myth of Shadow 1 grew, the guardian angel that JSOC deployed when missions went sideways. The promise that when you're alone, when you're surrounded, when death is certain, someone is watching. Ross operated for another 3 years, 73 confirmed kills across 5 combat deployments, 3 silver stars that remained classified, 2 bronze stars she could never publicly acknowledge, 1 Medal of Honor nomination buried deep in classified channels. On her last deployment, Ross provided overwatch for a Delta Force hostage rescue in northern Iraq. Intelligence predicted light defenses. Intelligence was wrong again. The Delta team fought through 70 fighters where they expected 20. Ross engaged without authorization, spent 90 minutes eliminating threats. 32 enemy fighters killed. The Delta team completed their rescue with 0 casualties. But during extraction, an RPG detonated close to her position. Shrapnel caught her right shoulder and left leg. Not life-threatening, but serious enough to end her field career. Doctors said she'd recover, could return to operations in 12 to 18 months. But Ross knew the truth. A sniper needed absolute physical control. Wounds healed, but the body remembered. Developed tremors barely visible, but catastrophic at 400 meters. She could probably return to field operations, but probably wasn't good enough when lives depended on absolute precision. Ross submitted her retirement paperwork 8 months later. JSOC offered instructor positions, opportunities to pass her knowledge to the next generation. She accepted a position at the Special Operations Target Interdiction course, where Army snipers learned advanced techniques. The students didn't know who she was at first. Saw a woman in her early 30s with a slight limp. Someone who'd probably been a decent sniper. That misconception lasted until the first range day. Ross demonstrated fundamentals with shooting that made experienced snipers question physics. 500-meter shots in crosswind, moving target engagements that required calculations She performed faster than computers. When students tried to replicate her demonstrations, they understood. This wasn't just training, this was mastery developed through thousands of hours. Word spread through special operations. Shadow 1 was teaching. The myth had a name. Students requested assignment to her classes specifically. Ross taught them all with professional patience. No war stories, no embellishment, just technical instruction in making shots most people considered impossible. Sometimes other instructors would ask about her deployments. Whether the stories were true, Ross would smile and say most war stories were exaggerated, that she'd done her job to the best of her ability. But occasionally, when pressed by instructors with clearance and need to know, she'd confirm details. Yes, she'd supported the SEAL team in Syria. Yes, the kill count was accurate. Yes, Shadow 1 was her call sign. And yes, if she had to do it again, she'd make the same decisions, violate the same orders, take the same risks, because warriors needed guardians who operated in shadows. 5 years into teaching, Ross received a message through JSOC channels. A package was waiting, classified material requiring her signature. Inside was the Medal of Honor citation that had been buried for 8 years. The nomination Hayes had submitted, that had been classified because acknowledging it would require acknowledging operations that officially never happened. Some colonel had finally pushed it through, decided 8 years was long enough. The citation detailed the Syrian operation, the decision to engage despite orders, the 35 enemy fighters eliminated, the 8 American lives saved. It noted that Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross had demonstrated valor beyond the call of duty, had placed herself at extreme risk to protect fellow warriors. The medal would never be presented publicly, would never appear on her official record, would be stored in a classified vault. But it existed. Ross read the citation once, felt the weight of memory, remembered Morrison's fear, Hayes's gratitude, the 35 bodies in a Syrian compound. She filed the citation in her personal safe, never mentioned it. The medal wasn't why she'd engaged, wasn't why she'd spent 3 years in shadows, wasn't why she now taught others how to save their brothers. She'd engaged because it was right, because orders were guidelines and lives were absolute. That was enough. That was everything. In her 10th year as instructor, Ross taught an advanced course for JSOC-assigned snipers. One student stood out. Female, 23, Army Ranger qualified. Natural talent combined with obsessive practice. Her name was Sarah Chen. On the final range day, Ross ran a complex scenario. Multiple targets, time pressure, wind conditions, moving threats mixed with civilians. Chen performed flawlessly. 12 targets, 12 hits, 0 civilian casualties. After the exercise, Ross pulled Chen aside. "You're good, very good. JSOC is going to want you." Chen nodded. "That's the goal, ma'am." Ross was quiet, thinking about what to say. If you accept JSOC assignment, understand what you're choosing. You'll do things that can't be acknowledged, save lives that won't be publicized, earn medals buried in vaults, operate alone where backup is theoretical. Chen met her eyes. "Like you did, ma'am." Ross smiled slightly. "Stories get exaggerated. I read the after-action report from Syria. I have clearance now. What did you think of that operation?" Chen didn't hesitate. "I think you violated orders to save 8 lives, made 35 perfect shots, demonstrated that sometimes the right decision isn't the authorized decision. And if I'm ever in that position, I hope I have the courage to make the same call." Ross studied her. The courage isn't in making the call. It's in accepting the consequences, in operating without recognition, in finding satisfaction in mission success rather than acknowledgement. "I understand, ma'am." "Do you?" Because it's easy to say when you're 23 and haven't spent years watching others take credit for missions you completed, haven't been wounded on operations that officially never happened. Chen was quiet, processing reality behind romance. Ma'am, would you do it again? Knowing everything now? Would you still choose this path? Ross didn't hesitate. Yes, every time. Because somewhere 8 SEALs are alive who'd be dead if I'd followed orders. 40 Rangers went home because I climbed a cliff I wasn't supposed to climb. That matters more than medals or recognition. She met Chen's eyes. You do this work because warriors need shadows. Because missions require capabilities that can't be discussed. Because sometimes the most important operations are the ones nobody knows about. Chen nodded. Then I want to do this work, ma'am. Then understand one more thing. When you're alone at 3 in the morning, watching through a scope, and you have to decide whether to engage or observe, remember this. Orders are written by people who aren't there. Lives are lost by people who are. You make the call that saves warriors. You accept consequences. And you sleep knowing you did the job. Yes, ma'am. Good. I'm recommending you for JSOC recruitment. Train hard. And when the moment comes where you choose between orders and lives, choose lives. Always choose lives. 6 months later, Ross received a message. Sarah Chen had been accepted, was developing into exactly the kind of operator special operations needed. The next generation was being trained. The promise continued. Shadow 1 was becoming plural. Ross was 52 when she finally retired from teaching. 27 years of military service, 15 in special operations, 10 teaching warriors. Her body had finally told her what her mind knew. The shoulder ached. The leg developed arthritis. Time to step back. On her last day, students and instructors organized an unofficial ceremony. The commandant made brief remarks. Staff Sergeant Ross served in capacities most will never understand. Operated in places we can't discuss. For 10 years, she's passed that knowledge to warriors who've used it to save American lives. He paused. I can't tell you about her deployments. Can't discuss operations that earned awards we can't display. But American warriors are alive because she was watching. And future warriors will survive because she taught them. The formation rendered honors. After the ceremony, Hayes appeared, 20 years older than Syria, but still the same warrior. I wanted to be here, wanted you to know what you did mattered. Still matters. Will always matter. Ross smiled. How are your men? All alive, all thriving. Morrison's a Master Chief now, training the next generation. Hayes pulled something from his pocket, the photograph from his office. 8 SEALs and 1 sniper at a compound wall. I've kept this on my wall since that day. Looked at it every time I sent teams downrange. Reminder that sometimes the impossible becomes possible. He handed it to Ross. I want you to have it. Ross took the photograph, looked at the younger version of herself, the woman who'd made the decision that mission parameters changed when lives were at stake. She remembered that woman. Still was that woman. Thank you for preserving the operation, for teaching it, for making sure future operators know that sometimes rules are guidelines and lives are absolute. Hayes nodded. That lesson saves warriors. Every class that studies your decisions learns that orders are important, but lives are more important. They talked for another hour about deployments and missions and warriors who'd served, about legacy and teaching and the next generation. When Hayes finally left, Ross was alone with the photograph and her memories. 27 years of service, 73 confirmed kills, awards that existed only in classified files, 1 Medal of Honor never publicly acknowledged, hundreds of students taught, dozens of lives saved through lessons that would propagate through generations. The wolf doesn't announce itself. It watches from shadows, waits for the moment when capabilities are needed, strikes with precision that turns impossible odds into inevitable victory. Amaya Ross had been that wolf, the silent guardian, the hidden protector, the sniper who emerged from shadows to change everything. And somewhere, in current operations across multiple theaters, operators trained by Ross were continuing the mission, watching when everyone else focused forward, Delivering salvation when warriors needed guardian angels they didn't know existed. The promise continued. The legacy lived. The shadows protected warriors who fought in light. That was enough. That was everything. That was the silent promise every operator like Ross made when they accepted missions that didn't officially exist. We're watching. We're ready. And when you need us most, we'll be there. Even if you never know our names. Especially if you never know our names. Because the most effective operators are the ones you never hear about until the moment their skills become the difference between survival and catastrophe. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, Shadow 1. The guardian angel 8 SEALs never knew they had until the moment she saved their lives and changed everything. The legend that became a teacher, the shadow that became a legacy. The warrior who proved that sometimes salvation comes from the person you never knew was there. Always watching, always ready, always refusing to let good warriors die alone. Always.